Acquiring a business? BizNexus simplifies it. Access thousands of updated opportunities in our DIY marketplace or supercharge team sourcing with OmniSource, your all-in-one platform for on-market, off-market, and coming soon deals. Scale smarter today. Learn more or book a demo at www.biznexus.com.
Disclaimer from the always present legal team. Podcast conversations don't necessarily reflect the views of BizNexus Incorporated. Everything you hear is informational news and updates from around the industry. We're not recommending any investments. We're not offering any investment advice. Be sure to do your own homework.
You know, it's kind of wild to see these huge mergers and acquisitions all over the news lately.
Yeah.
Like, on the one hand, you've got Mars going and buying Kellanova.
Right.
I mean, that's a deal worth billions with a B.
Huge.
And then on the other hand, you've got the FTC coming in and blocking these other mega mergers like they did with that Lockheed Aerojet deal last year.
Mm-hmm.
So it really makes you wonder what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, what's driving all this M&A activity? And I guess, what does it mean for the future?
Yeah.
What's in store for 2025? That's exactly what we're diving into today.
Okay.
With insights from leading advisory firms and CEOs.
Interesting. What I'm seeing is that the overall outlook for M&A in 2025,
Okay.
it is optimistic,
Okay.
but it's not a straightforward, like, everything's booming kind of scenario.
Oh.
The sources we're looking at paint a much more nuanced picture.
So there's more to the story than just a surge in deals.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Think of it more like a slowly rising tide
Yeah.
rather than a tsunami. There are these powerful forces at play, like
Yeah.
the sheer amount of capital that private equity firms have ready to invest.
We're talking trillions of dollars, right?
Trillions.
Wow.
And the ongoing pressure for businesses to, adapt to digital transformation.
Right.
Those two factors are creating kind of steady upward pressure on M&A activity.
Okay, so we've got this upward pressure, but at the same time, the FTC seems to be putting on the brakes a little bit.
Right.
It seems like they're taking a much tougher stance against these mega mergers.
Mm-hmm.
What's the thinking there?
Well, the FTC,
Yeah.
especially under Lena Khan,
Right.
has really been focusing on preventing monopolies and promoting competition.
Okay.
Their concern is that these massive mergers can stifle innovation and harm consumers in the long run,
Right.
like we saw with the Lockheed Aerojet deal.
Mm-hmm.
The FTC stepped in and argued that the merger would harm competition in the defense industry.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that even with the stricter regulatory environment, we're still seeing a lot of deals go through.
Yeah, and I think that's because companies are getting smarter about how they approach M&A.
Oh.
They're being more selective about their targets,
Right.
focusing on deals that are less likely to raise those antitrust concerns.
Makes sense.
And they're also willing to make concessions to appease regulators, like divesting certain assets or making commitments to maintain competition.
So it sounds like companies are kind of learning to play the long game,
Exactly.
knowing that getting a deal approved might take more time and effort than it did in the past.
Yeah, and it's not just the regulatory landscape that's changed.
Right.
We've been through a bit of a roller coaster ride economically over the past few years.
Oh, yeah.
Think about the Fed's interest rate hikes,
Mm-hmm.
the uncertainty surrounding inflation,
Uh-huh.
and how company valuations have fluctuated.
Yeah, it's definitely been a volatile time, and I imagine that's made it harder for companies to predict the future and make these big M&A decisions.
For sure. Right. But here's the really interesting part.
Okay.
Despite all these challenges,
Yeah.
the sources we're looking at,
Mm-hmm.
especially this survey from EY,
Okay.
reveal that over 90% of CEOs
Wow.
are planning to participate in some form of M&A activity in the coming months.
90%, that's a huge number.
It is.
What's giving them the confidence to make these moves in such a complex environment?
Well, I think there are a few factors converging to create this sense of cautious optimism.
Okay.
First, there's a feeling that the economy might be stabilizing.
Okay.
Inflation seems to be cooling down.
Right.
And while interest rates are still high,
Yeah.
there's a sense that the Fed might be nearing the end of its rate hike cycle.
Okay.
So this greater stability makes it easier for companies to plan for the future
Yeah, makes sense.
and take calculated risks.
Yeah. So that stability factor makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
But what about that other factor you mentioned earlier? Like
Yeah.
that massive amount of capital that private equity firms are sitting on,
Yeah.
that's got to be playing a role too, right?
It's huge.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about an estimated $2 trillion in dry powder.
2 trillion.
Yeah, that's the term used to describe the uninvested capital that private equity firms have on hand.
I see.
And the pressure is on to put that money to work and generate returns for their investors.
So all that money just sitting there,
Yeah.
it's almost like creating this gravitational pull toward M&A.
Right.
And it's not just the private equity firms themselves that are feeling the pressure.
Right.
Their investors, those limited partners,
Mm-hmm.
they want to see their money grow.
They do.
So it creates this whole ecosystem where
Yeah.
everyone is incentivized to see deals happen.
That's right.
So while economic uncertainty might make some companies hesitant,
Huh?
this influx of private equity capital is pushing the M&A market forward.
Yeah, you've got these competing forces that are shaping the whole landscape.
That's really interesting.
It is.
So knowing that there's this underlying pressure for M&A activity,
Yeah.
where are we likely to see the most action? Are there any particular industries that are heating up?
Absolutely. Some sectors are definitely hotter than others.
Like what?
Let's start with life sciences.
Okay.
This industry is experiencing consistent growth and innovation, making it ripe for acquisitions.
Right.
Pharmaceutical companies are looking to expand their pipelines, and smaller biotech firms are attractive targets
Yeah.
with their cutting-edge research and technologies.
So it's like a perfect marriage of established players with deep pockets
Right.
and agile innovators with groundbreaking ideas.
Exactly. Another hot sector is energy.
Okay.
We're seeing a lot of consolidation happening as larger energy companies look to gain market share and streamline their operations.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, there's the massive shift towards renewable energy sources,
Right.
which is driving a wave of M&A activity as companies position themselves to capitalize on this growing market.
So they need to adapt
Yeah.
and evolve to survive. And sometimes the fastest way to do that is to acquire a company that already has the expertise or the technology they need.
Exactly.
Right.
And then we can't forget about physical infrastructure.
Okay.
With governments around the world investing heavily in infrastructure projects,
Uh-huh.
we're seeing a surge in M&A activity in related industries.
Like what kind of industries?
Companies involved in construction engineering materials, logistics,
Okay.
they're all benefiting from this increased demand.
So those are the hot sectors.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, are there any industries that you think might be a little cooler in terms of M&A activity? Where should companies tread more cautiously?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
While there are always exceptions,
Sure.
I'd say consumer products and climate tech might see more moderate activity
Okay.
in consumer products.
Yeah.
We're seeing shifting consumer preferences and supply chain challenges,
Right.
which are making companies more cautious about making big acquisitions.
That makes sense because it's a lot harder to predict what consumers will want in the future.
Exactly.
And those supply chain disruptions,
Yeah.
they can make it really difficult to integrate a newly acquired company.
For sure.
Like,
And in climate tech,
okay.
while the long-term potential is huge,
Yeah.
it's still a relatively early-stage industry.
Uh-huh.
Valuations can be volatile.
Okay.
And it's important to carefully assess the technology and the market viability of any potential acquisitions.
So it's not just about jumping on the bandwagon.
No.
It's about being strategic and making sure the deal makes sense for your long-term goals.
Absolutely.
Right. And, it's impossible to talk about the future of M&A without addressing the elephant in the room,
Uh-huh.
technology,
Right.
especially AI.
Yeah,
This is a force that's reshaping the entire landscape.
totally.
So AI is changing everything, and M&A is no exception.
Right.
But how exactly is it impacting this space?
Well,
Is it just about acquiring AI companies?
it's much more than that. Think about it. Companies are under immense pressure to adapt and remain competitive in this rapidly evolving technological landscape.
Right.
So acquisitions become an attractive way to quickly acquire those much-needed tech capabilities.
Makes sense.
Whether it's AI or data analytics or cybersecurity.
Mhm.
I mean, why spend years building something from scratch when you can acquire a company that already has it?
It's like a shortcut to innovation.
Yeah.
You get the technology and the talent all in one package.
Right.
But it's not just about acquiring AI companies, is it?
Right.
It sounds like AI is also transforming the M&A process itself.
You're absolutely right.
How so?
Take, for instance, this Accenture survey.
Okay.
They found that 64% of C-suite executives
Wow.
believe that generative AI will fundamentally change how deals are done.
Okay.
We're talking about using AI to streamline due diligence, analyze massive amounts of data to identify potential risks and opportunities, and even predict the likelihood of a deal success.
So you're saying you can feed all the relevant data into an AI system
Yeah,
and get back a detailed analysis of a potential merger's strengths and weaknesses.
exactly.
That's wild.
It is.
It sounds like AI could make the whole process more efficient,
Yeah,
more accurate, and ultimately more successful.
for sure.
But even with all these exciting advancements,
Yeah,
we can't forget about those potential roadblocks we discussed earlier.
right.
Like navigating the regulatory landscape is still going to be a major challenge, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Even if a deal seems perfect on paper, getting regulatory approval is no longer a given.
Right.
We're seeing deal approvals taking longer, with timelines of 12 months or more becoming increasingly common.
Wow.
So this creates uncertainty
Yeah.
and can potentially derail deals,
Right.
especially if companies aren't prepared for the long haul.
So it's not just about finding the right deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's about having the patience and the resources to navigate this whole complex regulatory process.
yeah.
So what are some strategies companies can use to navigate these complexities?
Having a crystal clear plan is paramount.
Okay.
It's no longer enough to just want to buy a company.
Mm-hmm.
You need a strategic rationale,
Right.
a deep understanding of your target,
Okay.
and a plan for how you'll create value.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it sounds like companies really need to do their homework
Yeah,
and be prepared for a long and winding road to get a deal across the finish line.
it is.
But even with a solid plan,
Yeah.
it's impossible to predict everything, right?
You're right. Even with the best planning, there will always be those unexpected twists and turns.
Right.
And that's why it's so important to be agile and adaptable,
Mm-hmm.
ready to adjust your strategy as needed.
Speaking of agility,
Yeah.
one thing that struck me from the research
Okay.
is how important speed is becoming in this environment.
Yeah.
It's not just about having a good plan, it's about being able to execute it quickly and decisively.
That's a really crucial point. The sources we're looking at, particularly the one from Accenture,
Okay.
really highlight that need for speed
Yeah.
as more players enter the M&A market.
Right.
Competition for the best targets is intensifying.
Right.
So if you're slow to move, you risk missing out on opportunities.
It's almost like playing a game of high-stakes chess.
Yeah.
You need to anticipate your opponent's moves, think several steps ahead,
Mm-hmm.
and be ready to seize the advantage when it presents itself.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
It really captures the strategic thinking and quick decision-making that are so essential in today's M&A landscape.
Great.
And remember, it's not just about speed for speed's sake.
Right.
It's about being prepared to act when the right opportunity arises. And that's where having a solid plan
Yeah.
and that thorough due diligence come in.
So you need to be both a strategist and an opportunist.
Yeah.
You need to have that vision for where you want to go,
Uh-huh.
but you also need to be flexible enough to adjust your course when you spot a promising target.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
Right.
And, to bring this all to life, I think it would be helpful to look at some real-world examples.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
It's always helpful to see how these concepts play out in the real world.
Right.
What companies come to mind?
One example that I think really illustrates this point about speed and agility
Okay.
is Lineage Logistics.
Okay.
They've been on this incredible acquisition spree,
Really?
acquiring over 100 companies in just 16 years.
Wow.
They operate in the cold storage warehouse sector,
Okay.
and they've grown rapidly by strategically acquiring smaller players and integrating them into their network.
Wow, 100 companies.
It's a lot.
That's a phenomenal growth trajectory.
Yeah,
They must have a very well-defined strategy
they do.
and the ability to move quickly to close deals.
And their recent IPO, where they raised billions of dollars, shows that investors are confident in their ability to continue that aggressive growth strategy.
It's interesting that they've chosen to focus on a very specific niche.
Cold storage warehouses.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like that deep expertise in a particular sector can be a real advantage in the M&A game.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It allows you to identify those most promising acquisition targets,
Right.
accurately assess their value,
Mm-hmm.
and integrate them more seamlessly into your existing operations.
Makes sense.
Another company that comes to mind is MRI Software.
Okay.
They've been very active in the M&A space as well,
Okay.
completing nearly 60 acquisitions in the past 15 years.
Wow.
They provide software solutions for the real estate industry,
Okay.
and they've used M&A to expand their product portfolio and their geographic reach.
So both Lineage and MRI software,
Yeah.
they operate in sectors that are experiencing significant growth.
That's right.
Cold storage due to the rise of e-commerce and home delivery, and software due to the ongoing digital transformation of businesses. It seems like riding those industry tailwinds can give companies a real edge in the M&A market.
That's a great observation. Being in a growth industry can definitely create more opportunities for M&A.
Right.
But it's not just about being in the right industry.
Yeah.
It's also about making smart acquisitions that add value to your business.
Right.
And that brings us to another important point from the research valuations.
Yeah. Valuations are always a critical factor in M&A.
Huge.
And in this current environment where there's so much competition for deals, it seems like getting valuations right is more important than ever.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
One of the experts we're looking at, Mark Sirower from Deloitte,
Okay.
emphasized the importance of avoiding overpaying for acquisitions.
Okay.
He pointed out that in a market with high valuations,
Right.
it's more important for CEOs to know what companies they want to buy and be willing to walk away from a deal if the price isn't right.
So it's like the old saying,
Yeah.
it's better to miss a good deal than to make a bad one.
Exactly.
But how do you know what a good deal looks like in this environment where valuations can be so volatile?
That's where thorough due diligence
Okay.
and a deep understanding of your target market come into play.
Right.
You need to be able to look beyond the hype and accurately assess the intrinsic value of a potential acquisition.
So it's about looking beyond the numbers and
Mhm.
really understanding the company's underlying business, its growth potential, and its strategic fit with your own organization.
Exactly.
Got it.
And it's not just about the financial aspects.
Right.
You also need to consider the cultural fit,
Okay.
the potential synergies, and how the integration process will be managed.
Yeah, it's a lot to consider.
It is.
I'm curious, what are some of the common pitfalls that companies fall into when it comes to valuations?
One of the biggest mistakes, I think, is getting caught up in a bidding war
Okay.
and overpaying for a target.
Right.
Sometimes companies get so focused on winning the deal
Yeah.
that they lose sight of the fundamentals,
Right.
and that can lead to disastrous consequences down the road.
It's like getting swept up in the excitement of an auction and ending up paying way more than you intended.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's important to stay disciplined,
Okay.
stick to your valuation criteria,
Right.
and be willing to walk away if the price gets too high.
So it's about being strategic
Yeah,
and not letting your emotions get the better of you.
exactly.
Okay.
And, another aspect of M&A that often gets overlooked is the human element.
Oh, yeah.
We tend to focus on the financial and strategic aspects,
Right.
but the reality is that M&A is a people-driven process.
That's a great point. We've talked about having a plan,
Yeah.
being agile, getting valuations, right?
Right.
But what about the people involved in these transactions? How do you manage that human side of M&A
Whoa.
to ensure a smooth and successful transition?
That's where leadership, communication, and empathy come into play.
So it's not just about the numbers, it's about the people.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
We've talked about the strategic and financial aspects of M&A, but let's not forget about that human side of the equation.
Right behind every deal, there are people whose lives are being impacted.
Yeah.
Employees, leaders, customers,
Yeah.
they're all going through this period of uncertainty and change.
Exactly. And how you manage that human element can make all the difference between a successful integration and a chaotic mess.
Right.
One of the experts we spoke to,
Yeah.
Dan Hawkins, who specializes in M&A integration,
Okay.
he stressed the importance of clear and consistent communication throughout the process.
So people want to know what's happening, how it will affect them, and what their role will be in the new organization.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it's not just about keeping people informed.
Okay.
It's also about addressing their concerns, being transparent about the challenges, and celebrating the successes along the way.
So it's about building trust and creating a sense of shared purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And another key aspect of managing that human side of M&A is cultural integration. When two companies come together, you're essentially blending two different cultures,
Yeah.
each with its own values and norms and ways of doing things.
Right.
And if you don't manage that cultural integration carefully,
Yeah.
it can lead to conflict, resentment, and ultimately a failed merger.
So it's not just about merging balance sheets and product lines. It's
Yeah.
about merging mindsets
Yeah.
and creating a new shared culture.
Precisely. And that requires a deep understanding of both cultures,
Okay.
a willingness to compromise, and a commitment to creating a new culture that embraces the best of both worlds.
It sounds like leadership plays a critical role in this process.
Oh, for sure.
Leaders need to set the tone, communicate the vision, and create an environment where people feel valued and respected.
Absolutely. Leaders need to be visible, accessible, and empathetic throughout that integration process.
Yeah.
They need to listen to their employees' concerns, address their fears, and inspire them to embrace the change.
So it sounds like successful M&A is as much about emotional intelligence as it is about financial acumen.
I couldn't agree more.
Right.
And, one of the biggest challenges in managing the human side of M&A is dealing with uncertainty and anxiety.
Sure.
Change is never easy.
Yeah.
And when people's jobs and careers are on the line, it can create a lot of stress and tension.
Of course, people want to know if they'll still have a job,
Right.
if their role will change, and if their skills will be valued in the new organization.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for leaders to be upfront about the potential impacts of the merger,
Okay.
to provide support and resources to help employees navigate the transition,
Yeah.
and to create a culture where people feel safe to express their concerns.
It's about acknowledging the human cost of change and providing the support people need to adapt and thrive in the new environment.
Well said.
Yeah.
And, one thing that often gets overlooked is the impact on customers.
Oh,
When two companies merge,
Yeah.
it can create confusion and uncertainty for customers as well.
Right. They might be wondering if their products or services will change, if their contracts will be honored, and who they should contact for support.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have a clear communication plan for customers as well.
Okay.
Let them know what's happening, how it will affect them, and what they can expect in the future.
It's about building trust and maintaining strong relationships, even during a period of significant change.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Successful M&A isn't just about the deal itself.
Right.
It's about the people, the culture, and the relationships.
Yeah.
And if you can manage those elements effectively,
Right.
you'll be well on your way to a smooth and successful integration.
This has been a really insightful discussion about the human side of M&A.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to get caught up in the financial and strategic aspects of these deals.
Right.
But it's so important to remember that there are real people involved and their experiences matter.
I agree. The human factor is often the key to unlocking the full potential of an M&A deal.
So we've talked about the trends shaping the M&A landscape, the importance of speed and agility,
Right.
challenges of valuations, and the complexities of managing that human element.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what concrete advice would you give to companies that are considering embarking on this M&A journey?
That's a great question. And it leads us perfectly into the final part of our deep dive.
Yeah, okay.
We'll be back after a short break to explore some actionable strategies for M&A success in this dynamic environment.
So we're back and ready to dive into some actionable advice
Right.
for companies looking to not just survive, but thrive in this crazy M&A landscape.
Yeah, the sources we've looked at offer some really good practical advice.
Okay.
And one of the most consistent pieces of advice
Yeah.
is deceptively simple.
What's that?
Have a rock-solid plan.
Okay. So it's not just about jumping headfirst into the M&A pool.
Right.
You got to be strategic. Identify those ideal targets and understand exactly why you want them.
It's like Deloitte's Mark Searer said, with market valuations this high, it's more important for CEOs to know what companies they want to buy.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and this plan needs to go beyond just a list of companies.
Okay.
It should articulate how you'll create value through the acquisition, how you'll navigate that regulatory landscape,
Right.
and how you'll manage that often overlooked integration process.
So it's like having a detailed roadmap, not just a vague sense of direction.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm also noticing how much emphasis our experts are putting on being prepared for a longer deal approval process.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like those 9-month timelines we used to see are a thing of the past.
Yeah. Accenture's Jay Neely highlighted that deal closures now routinely take 12 months or even longer.
Wow, a whole year.
Yeah, so companies need to be prepared for the long haul,
Right.
both in terms of their internal resources and their communication with stakeholders.
That extended timeline just adds another layer of complexity.
It does.
To managing the human side of things,
Right.
keeping your team engaged and motivated
Yeah.
during like a year-long process can't be easy.
It's tough. And our expert Dan Hawkins offered some great insights on this.
Like what?
stressing the importance of clear, consistent communication
Okay.
and strong, empathetic leadership to maintain alignment and momentum throughout the process.
So we've got having a solid plan, anticipating potential delays, and managing the human element.
Right.
What other nuggets of wisdom did our experts offer?
Well, one that really stuck with me came from Accenture's Jay Neely again.
Okay.
He talked about the importance of readiness.
Okay.
Don't let the relative lull in M&A activity over the past few years lead to complacency.
Right.
Stay informed about market dynamics.
Yeah.
Keep your finger on the pulse of those emerging opportunities and be prepared to move swiftly when the right deal presents itself.
So it's like a sprinter, staying loose and focused,
Yeah,
ready to explode off the blocks when the starting pistol fires.
that's a great analogy.
Yeah, I like that one.
You need the skills, the insight and the foresight to recognize that perfect wave, and then the agility and determination to ride it to success.
So be prepared. Be ready to move quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And this might sound counterintuitive.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to walk away.
You got it. That's another crucial piece of advice.
Yeah.
Especially in this market with those sky-high valuations.
Right.
It's easy to get swept up in the frenzy,
Yeah, you get caught up in it.
but it's absolutely vital to stick to your criteria,
Yeah.
maintain your discipline, and not overpay just to get a deal done.
It takes wisdom to know when to hold back
Uh-huh.
and when to go all in.
It does.
It's like a poker player.
Right.
Recognizing when it's time to fold no matter how tempting that pot might look.
Perfect analogy.
Right.
It underscores the need for that disciplined and strategic approach to M&A.
Yeah.
Remember, it's not about winning every hand. It's about making those smart, informed decisions that align with your long-term goals and create lasting value.
So we've really covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
As we wrap up, what are some final thoughts for our listeners
Yeah.
to think about as they navigate this exciting and ever-evolving world of M&A?
I think the most important takeaway is this.
Okay.
While the outlook for M&A in 2025 and beyond is promising,
Right.
success isn't guaranteed.
Right.
It requires that meticulous planning, a deep understanding of your target market, the ability to execute flawlessly,
Yeah.
and perhaps most importantly, a recognition that this is a human endeavor, not just a financial transaction.
Well said. As we've seen from the expert insights and those real-world examples we've discussed, navigating the M&A landscape
Right.
is both an art and a science.
Right.
It demands strategic thinking, financial savvy, and a deep appreciation for the human dynamics at play.
It does.
But with the right approach, the right mindset, and the right team by your side, M&A can be a really powerful engine for growth, innovation, and transformation.
Absolutely. Remember, knowledge is power. And we hope this deep dive has provided you with the information and the inspiration you need to make informed decisions, seize the opportunities that lie ahead, and achieve those strategic goals.
And as always, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop learning.
Yeah.
Until next time,
Yeah.
happy deal making.